Come on and slam. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. This is Illiterate. I read some stuff this week.
I watched a movie. This week we are covering Space Jam: A New Legacy. And we're not usually one to follow the kind of negative talk. We're usually one to follow up the whys and what led us to here and what is it
and how, well, not even good, just what is it about?
Lord.
What could it possibly be about?
The biggest thing is we've been waiting this long for it. This is a movie that's been rumored for decades. And so you get to 2021 and I started to ask the question of for real, like, why now?
Mm-hmm.
I've found something by the end of it pretty touching, and I'm really excited to open up this episode because I think we have something behind the Looney Tunes and Space Jam as a property that nobody's expecting. You know the show. This is this is what we do, so I couldn't be more excited.
A couple of the things that hopefully we'll hit on. Was it always for kids? That's a question I was wondering as far as Looney Tunes, because the nostalgia maybe clouds what it was, what it became, and then the ideas of originality, authenticity. I always saw the Looney Tunes as like the Burger King or Pepsi of cartoons, whereas Disney was the main one, and then Looney Tunes was just trying to catch up and copy them and be relevant in spite of them.
That's a great question right there on the top to back that question up of why, how did we end up here? How did we end up in the 90s with Michael Jordan in this property? These are characters from the 30s.
Yeah.
This is one of the longest standing properties. It's a juggernaut in the studios. It's the backbone workhorse of this studio. How did it even come together? Because these characters are from another time. I'm very interested in the themes, just the generational themes, even just before we've gotten going. Sorry, I hate to interrupt.
No, that's great. It's great. Let's start with the new film, the critical standpoint, because the old one gets regarded as this cultural touchstone of the 90s, but the original critics rating, and this is all Rotten Tomatoes stuff, so whether or not you believe in that, but the 44 critics rating and then a 66 audience rating was not the gold.
It wasn't being hailed at the Academy Awards. It wasn't reaching the, Roger Rabbit, gravitas that critics definitely lauded that film for. But like you say, a touchstone and a crossing of so many different genres and pieces of iconography.
And we'll get to some of that when we get into the making of the first one, but just in terms of the differences, number one, Michael Jordan versus LeBron James, which I can't speak to all the enormity of both of those people and personalities and legacies and whatever, but just in terms of the storyline, in the original, Michael Jordan was helping the Looney Tunes.
Yes, they needed
him. And in this one, it's the other way. Yeah.
It's played out in very simple logic. Is Bugs Bunny thinks, well, we can just play a simple, schoolyard game right here and beat these little short aliens. And then they realize there's more to the deal that you didn't realize, the fine print. So what? And maybe we need to practice and maybe we need to get a team together. So they need the best basketball player on earth. That is the pitch for the movie. Basically, it makes all the sense in the world for the Looney Tunes to, we need Michael Jordan.
And there is no confusion about where they are in place and time, and you just go along with it. Like this new Looney Tunes Space Jam is not set in space, but who cares? Has nothing to do with space. It's about algorithms and corporate greed and a supercomputer that's trying to cash in.
Takes place in HBO Max.
Yeah, exactly. In similar status of being based on, I don't know very much about LeBron James, except that he is the face, or at least was for a large period of time, the face of the NBA. And it does involve his family versus Michael Jordan is sort of removed from his family and it's more about his career. Since that's...
Yes, this whole movie is like centered around like LeBron's family needs to like him, which is like so beyond what the original plot was.
He really has to be an actor. Right. So I looked into his family and it is pretty synonymous with what his actual family makeup is. Dom is the character that loves video games in the movie, and it's based on his real life son Bryce, who's in middle school. And then Darius is inspired by his oldest son, who is in high school and plays basketball. And then his daughter is based on his real life daughter. But in terms of him being a neglectful parent or pushing them to do, he's like, that's not really his brand.
Yes. So, it's not like they're really, this is no documentary or anything like that. So it's interesting that we have to have this fake family. But then I feel like we start to uncover some of the character problems here. Because if we're going to paint him as the bad guy, quote unquote bad guy, they know he's still so likable from basically the moment you meet him. And I got very quickly the taste that you get once in a while when you're looking at things through these types of lenses, the taste of maybe this is contractual. And I started seeing a very different character emerging on the screen from what I saw in the original Space Jam. What I eventually saw in this movie is a character and an actor who at no point could be the butt of any joke.
Right.
And it was quite interesting that the ego was almost on display in that way. Immediately, you start to limit that character's depth. So the first time Michael Jordan meets the Monstars, he's balled up into a basketball and they play ball with him. Right. And it's just this, that's the stark
Well, you have
difference.
to wonder,
Yes,
you have to wonder with the timeline of this. So 2014 was when Warner Brothers announced the plans with LeBron. As of now, the timeline is close, where Michael Jordan was 32 when they filmed the first one, and LeBron is 36 this year. But announcing that he was going to be in it in 2014, how much has his career changed in the past 7 years? So maybe there's some of that as well. Maybe he was more the way Michael was at 32.
Definitely, yeah. If you think about it in the parallel
36,
track like that, I could see that he might just not ready to make fun of himself. And that was so integral to the plot of Space Jam, is in the original, is him moving on from basketball. We were talking about his insecurity in his career, what was playing out publicly in the mid 90s.
Well, the last thing for that, as far as like silliness and the, like you're talking about the earnestness, what is this about? I just seeing, because there was a thing about Porky Pig rapping and like how that's not relevant, or it goes on for too long and it's just a bizarre.
Right.
I'd like to draw some criticism that this new one has in parallel as we go through this with some of the older stuff and be like, well, it really wasn't. We're just sort of misremembering, like the Mandela effect, where we thought it was one thing. The last track of the soundtrack of the original movie is Bugs Bunny rapping.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole
Buggin'?
track.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. No, I
so it's not that far off.
No, it's not.
As far as it wasn't
and you're exactly right. It's not off base at all. It's like, yeah, there wasn't a scene with Bugs Bunny rapping, but the whole track is there, and somebody paid good money to do it. Thousands and thousands.
Well, and here's who did it. Was the rap was written by Sean Carter, aka Jay-Z.
Oh my god. So
Jay-Z wrote a rap.
Let's be real about how much money, how seriously they were about doing that, and it was very serious.
Shameless.
That was when you put these two comparatively together, no, it's at least down on this moment, it's not that different. Where this one started to stray off for me, and I'm looking for, they're traveling through the Warnerverse. Instantly, Bugs Bunny, on a search to find and amass the team, you get this caricature Saturday Night Live bit style thing that ends up actually going on for a minute. And I start wondering, like, man, this is a substantial chunk of this movie, and is it adding up? And you're getting one thing after another, and now we're in this property. Do you remember this? Hey kids, have you ever heard of this? And we know you love this. Rick and Morty show up. Like, it's absolutely bonkers. It does change, and it surprises me, but up and through this point, I'm feeling so disjointed in the hoops I'm feeling like this thing is having to jump through just to get on the screen. And I wish, ultimately, I just wish that LeBron was a little bit more willing to take a joke, that he could feel a little bit more part of the Looney Tunes before the movie he kicks into high gear.
Let's talk about the Looney Tunes as a whole. What are they, or what were they? Because you're saying, I wish he was more like them, or they had more of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't go to Rick and Morty land.
Please, because like you're saying, and it's such a good way to put it, is the Burger King. You got McDonald's and Burger Kings. It's the ultimate it's the face-off. This is the Coke and Pepsi, baby. This is the rivalry, and that's such a great way to put it. And I think that puts them just on the right footing against all of the other major characters, the Disneys and everything else out there. So I would love to really get into the history of how in the world we got into the 90s to begin with, before we get into all the problems I was just going on about.
music has always been a thing with them, more so than I thought.
Really?
And even tying into like corporate shilling merchandise from the 90s goes back to the 30s. So this was Looney Tunes, first created in 1930. Disney's first animated feature, Snow White, was in 37.
Okay.
So this is before either of them were doing full-length feature anything. Produced by this guy, Leon Schlesinger, and they were as a part of Warner Brothers. And just as an interesting side note, the gym in the first Space Jam is called Schlesinger Gym. So they did a little nod to him.
Yes.
But the purpose was animated shorts used to promote Warner Brothers music. So Warner Brothers had just made all of these acquisitions, and Warner Music is now, as it was, a huge music company. So they were using them for the sales of their sheet music and phonograph records back in the 30s. It was a conduit for music sales. The name is inspired because Disney was doing this too. They had a cartoon series called Silly Symphonies, which is where some of the Mandela effect comes in, because Looney Tunes is not tuned like cartoon. It's tunes like
get them out of here. It's so weird. You know, when you go to write it down, you go, wait a second.
Yeah, and on the shirt it says tunes, and it's one of those things that people are like, surely that can't be the case. But if you know that it started from, well, we have these little ditties, we own all this music, how can we sell more music? Well, let's make these little animated things where the music's already available. So there was another portion that they also had called Merry Melodies, and that also kind of gets merged in with Looney Tunes. I don't know if you've seen both of those. And then there was like the blue ribbon.
Merry Melodies sound. When I think about it now and not knowing the formalities of it as a child and what my colloquialism picking it up along the way, I go, oh, that's just almost like a volume, you know?
Yeah, but they were both basically the same thing. They all made use of the same cartoon characters. At the start, Merry Melodies was in color and Looney Tunes was black and white, but eventually they were both color. And it was like, who even cares or knows the difference?
Yes.
Yeah. The only reason they kept doing both of them was because they didn't want the copyright to expire on one of them, so they just had to keep doing Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes.
Oh, interesting.
Since both of the characters were in both
working
of them.
Against that copyright. Keeping up that fight.
And as far as the music stuff, contractually, the Merry Melodies side of things, those cartoons at the beginning were obligated to include at least one full chorus from a Warner Brothers song. So the lyrics just had to come in for the chorus at some point, which annoyed the animators to no end.
Oh yeah,
because it just takes you completely out of it.
That's tasty right there. Now we're starting to get some flavors here. Mm-hmm.
And then eventually that requirement was dropped, and they didn't have to. It just doesn't work. So these shorts before films started airing in theaters from 1930 and went basically until 69.
Wow.
And they were before all types of films for all ages before the feature presentation. So not specifically aimed at kids, which gives it that Burger King versus McDonald's vibe. They were a little bit edgier.
Not so much that there weren't for kids, they're for kids. We're not saying that they're not for kids, but we're saying that they didn't want parents to just go, a cartoon. They wanted something there for the parents to be able to latch onto. Then would keep them onto there was some taste of that. And then that's such a valid thought. You see that, they're trying to widen that audience a little bit. And I think that that's happening so early, that it's such a granular thought that I think that expanded throughout the, animation for sure.
And they really didn't do many shorts after that initial run from the 30s to the 60s. They had some released sporadically through Warner Brothers, but really dormant until 87, I guess, was when they started doing more. And then they really wanted, which we'll get to, they tried to do a sequel to Space Jam, which was Looney Tunes Back in Action. If you're thinking, wait, but they did that feature film thing with Brendan Fraser and all that. We'll talk about that when we get to them trying to make a sequel to Space Jam. But really, up until Space Jam, they were just the classic cartoons that were being re-aired. Yeah,
very interesting. So from 1970 to the 80s, there was no new nothing.
Which is, we talked about in our Who Framed Roger Rabbit episode. That's why it was so crazy that got made. Because they're like, we're bringing back this golden age of animation, which then pushes Disney and all that stuff.
There you go. And so now all the kids that are coming into sentience through the 80s, now Bugs Bunny is alive. Here he is. He was just in this new movie.
And again, talking about like the cult status of this, it's like the movie with the world's most popular basketball player, with the most beloved cartoon characters, and a score of top 10 songs is not really coming from a place of pure artistic integrity.
Yeah.
You know,
You know, it's got some cells right there on top, you know,
yeah. Yeah. Well, it's also funny because you're talking about the new one wearing itself on its sleeve of like, well, see, we're just executives following an algorithm. And isn't that scary? And it's like, but you're doing it right
yeah, but
there.
like now here I'm watching it currently.
Mhm. The original is not immune to that as well. This is what I looked into, and it's a little bit different from our usual adaptation stuff as far as it's not a book, but adapted, you will not be surprised to find out from a multi-million-dollar ad campaign. Originally started out in 1992, there was a Super Bowl commercial for Nike, specifically the new Air Jordans, the Air Jordan
Yes.
7s, which then became known as the Hare Jordans because the commercial involved some bullies at a basketball court roughing up Bugs Bunny. He calls upon Michael Jordan, who schools them, the zany Looney Tunes stuff, and then the new Air Jordan 7s are out. The creator of this, I found a really great series of interviews with him. His name is Jim Riswold, and he wrote the spot and was in the ad agency, talk about like corporate stuff.
Yeah. What was his name?
Jim Riswold.
Jim Riswold. And so you're saying that
Yeah.
this is the guy that put the pieces together. Biggest basketball star on earth, Bugs Bunny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for a Super Bowl commercial.
The godfather of Space Jam, if you will.
Yeah. It's enough to get into him because like how did he get Michael Jordan to agree to the, you know what I mean? It has to be a certain person who can put all this together.
Right. That has the opportunity to even try to put something like that together. Now you're whittling it down to like, man, who is this now? Who is this dude?
Yeah. So the big thing that I saw, because he had a super close relationship with Jordan and Nike, because he's the ad agency that Nike is hiring, and then Nike is sponsoring Jordan. So he's sort of the middleman between the two. And he was like, I was not wrapped up in the mystique of him at all. I did not fawn over him. My job is just to make him look good in ads or to sell shoes or whatever. He's like, Michael had enough people who fawned over him that I didn't have to be that guy. I'll give you one specific example because they were friends, or he said, I considered Michael my friend. You know, you don't know with Michael Jordan what he's actually thinking about people. But they were saying they played golf together. He had to drive him back to the hotel that Michael Jordan was staying at, and Jim Riswold just had his tiny 1966 baby blue Volkswagen. Of course, Michael has his cadre of press people and agents and all that stuff. And then some people from Nike are like, you can't drive him back in that. Jordan's like, no, my college roommate had one. There's plenty of headroom. Not a big deal.
Yeah.
So they drive back to the hotel together, and the crowd is used to Michael Jordan coming through a side entrance in a fancy car with a bunch of people. So a Porsche rolls around the back alley, and this whole group of people, because of course everybody knows what hotel he's staying at, but they follow this fancy Porsche, and nobody sees Michael Jordan getting out in this junky old Volkswagen. So that was an example from him. Yeah, well, of some of the relationship
scene there, and I just want to again, and I poked at it earlier, but I want to reiterate for the audience just the different time that this was and what Michael Jordan was, because if you haven't seen The Last Dance, the 10-part documentary series on Netflix, it's absolutely incredible. What I know of Michael Jordan is Space Jam, and we're covering it here basically today. You know, it really put into context to me just what has happened over the last 30 years in terms of the information pipeline and fandom and what fame really is and how that has morphed and transformed in 30 years. When Michael Jordan is at the height of his fame, the information pipeline is a pinhole. It's like looking through a straw. What information goes in and comes out of there is pretty limited. And so the exposure from that, you only know so many people. You only know 5 names. And it took off, and Michael Jordan was at the top of it just at this particular moment. And because he was at the top of it when the information pipeline was so small, everybody knew who that was at every inch of this planet. And it's hard to demonstrate exactly what that looks and feels like now, because we live in an age of superfluous fandom. That type of fame will not be replicated. The difference now is, instead of looking through that pinhole, it's like walking under a bridge.
Well, and like you were talking about in terms of pairing a godlike figure in all different capacities with ads and commercialism and whatnot, like how Nike
with capitalism combined.
Yeah, all all of that stuff. Nike was sort of young, irreverent. They were able to punch up at Reebok and Adidas subtly, of course. But talking about getting to this Super Bowl ad, Phil Knight also abhorred traditional advertising. And Nike is now, I mean,
yes,
they have
Nike
all their
is
own
just
scandals
starting
and
to throw
problems.
punches through the back half of the 80s. Nike is not what it is today. Nike becomes what it is today through the 90s and through what is happening, what we're covering right now.
Well, so for example, the Just Do It first appeared in 1988, talking about their ad campaign. The Air Jordans first appeared in 84, 4 years before the Just Do It stuff, and Michael was a 21-year-old rookie, and they signed him for a 5-year, $500,000 deal. Yep. And now, God, the Jordan brand is worth billions and billions. It also, he created, some would say, the rise of the sneakerhead culture.
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't say some would say, I would say you could pinpoint it down to it. This is, draw that line right back to the mid-90s. You can draw almost right to Michael Jordan's doorstep. Launched sneakers into multimedia and on every billboard across the world.
Yeah.
As big as Michael Jordan was, now Nike is right up there next to him. That's the exposure going through that little tiny straw.
So speaking of money, Jim Riswold coming in with his ad agency and Nike, and they've signed Michael Jordan. He has done a ton of other Michael Jordan ads before the Super Bowl one. He did Spike Lee, his character, Mars Blackmon from She's Gotta Have It, was in a commercial series with Michael Jordan as a collab. And so what happened was Jim Riswold saw an ad for Spike Lee's film at a theater in LA. It was promoting his new film. There were scenes in She's Gotta Have It involving Air Jordans. Okay. And Jim Riswold is like, I love this. Unite Michael Jordan with a real basketball infatuation, a cultural piece of media that's going on. This happened 1988. And he called him up and said, hey, Spike Lee, would you like to star and direct the commercial and be with Michael Jordan?
Yeah,
Yeah. Speaking again to Jim Riswold's character, Michael loved She's Gotta Have It, loved Mars Blackmon, the character from it. And it also ties into kind of what's happening with Michael Jordan at the time, is making him human, having fun with things, making fun of him, all of that stuff. Because there was a 94 commercial with Mars Blackmon where this is now Michael Jordan is in his retirement and playing baseball.
Right.
And Mars Blackmon is going up to all these different famous baseball people and asking how Michael's doing. And they just all say, he's trying. And then it just says, just do it, Nike, Air Jordan, whatever. I'll post links to all the videos and ads and stuff we're talking about. But like Jim Riswold is giving him things that are basically making fun of him.
Right.
In one interview I saw, he just said he was ribbing him for having such a horrible batting average. And Michael's like, why is that in the commercial? And then Michael says, F you, I'll do it.
There we go.
And then it ends up being in the commercial.
Challenge him. He'll do it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and we're getting to the heart of, I think if there's a problem with the new one, I think it's that I don't see LeBron doing that. I don't think LeBron could work with this dude and make those choices to make it into, but we're talking about it. And this is the big thing with the MJ versus LeBron. It's just a different time because of what is happening with basketball, with commercialism in the early to mid 90s here. This is changing these businesses, and they're businesses. Let's remind ourselves here that these shoes, movies, basketball, these are all businesses. But what is happening here is so cataclysmic, and it has made the way for what we see now, and we're still paying the dividends of it. And this is all only possible because of what's going on here. But it's so hard to really describe how big this is, because I feel like it's so casual now, that the fandom, fame, the internet, and everything that is shoved down our throats right now, it's all so much, and it's also commonplace and banal, and it was not in 1995.
It's almost interesting as well, talking about coming from an ad man. He's thinking about all this stuff, maybe some would say from a sniveling, mustache twirling level. But then also he has this relationship with Michael Jordan. So it's just interesting that then he comes in and says, oh, I grew up loving Bugs Bunny, who is this wisecracking, takes the Mickey out of people and says, let's mash these two together. And it was just because he liked Bugs Bunny and knew that energy of Looney Tunes and Bugs Bunny. And it was interesting because he even said he had writing complications getting this Super Bowl ad made where the suits are saying, oh, Bugs can't be violent, Porky can't stutter, all this early arguing.
Right.
And he said, fine, we'll go with Roger Rabbit, which really was a chicken move, playing chicken, saying we'll do that. But they're like, no, we don't want that.
Yeah,
we'll change it.
So my God, Roger was played as a bluff. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
another rabbit.
That. You glaze over that, but I'm like, oh man, that's amazing because that's getting right to the heart of like, well, if you want it to be somebody else, if you want some other character to share the field with the biggest basketball player on earth, sure,
mm-hmm. Yeah. Disney owns them, yeah. So, but he was even saying that he felt Warner Brothers had sanitized him and wanted to put more irreverence in the ad, and is also not even sure that they used him to the fullest extent in Space Jam. Mm-hmm. Also, he was hired to work on Space Jam when it finally came to be. Yeah. He worked on a couple scenes, but he said he was dumped off. He's like the 5th to the last credit in the film. Or something like that. He was like, he doesn't like it. He said it's not funny. It's not like what the original Looney Tunes was.
Yeah.
I think he would be against Bugs Bunny rapping and all of that stuff. Right. And then he said it was interesting because Nike didn't want involvement in the film, but they're all over LeBron now and the new one.
Yeah, he when he lands into the Toon world, he makes the shape of a Nike symbol, and I wanted to crawl onto my floor and die.
Yeah. Well, speaking of kind of that over ad business, this Jim Riswold, his life and career takes a crazy turn.
Really?
So he was diagnosed with leukemia.
Oh my gosh.
He was diagnosed with leukemia in 2000 and quit advertising completely to become an artist, like a capital A artist. Oh, wow. He makes modern art. He said he changed from the career of selling people things they don't need to making things people don't want. And he wrote a 2017 memoir called Hitler Saved My Life because his artwork is all revolved around like denigrating and making fun of dictators and political figures and whatnot.
Oh man.
And it's also intertwined with his story about cancer.
Oh really?
So it's kind of interesting how he went and did that his whole life.
He totally got in touch with you just
and then
wow.
Went away from it. There is one piece of him that is still attached to Jordan. So the Air Jordan 20s, the 20th anniversary, part of the shoe design has a collage of various things related to Michael Jordan and the NBA and his career. And the word Rizzy is in that collage, which was Riswold's nickname.
Oh, yeah.
That was his influence as well, is not just, he was the ad man for the shoes.
It's so fascinating that is the kind of person that would really be the spark for what would become that film. Without him, who knows? But it would probably, there's got to be other things. But it's so odd that it's an advertiser that kind, that is really that's how it all came together back then. And it's so. I just watching it now. I'm thankful that they are tongue in cheek about exactly what it is. Like when Wayne Knight, oh God bless him, picks up Jordan from his house. He makes this amazing little monologue about like, we'll pick up X, Y, and Z. You got to get your Wheaties. Yeah,
he says, "Come on, Michael, it's game time. Get your Hanes on, lace up your Nikes, grab your Wheaties and your Gatorade. We'll pick up a Big Mac on the way to the ballpark." Because he was in all of those commercials.
It's just beautiful. And that's baked into just the writing of it, and everybody sees, it's comedy, and being able to just poke the fun of the being meta about poking fun of exactly what this is, and just being a little more natural. I think that's where at least that film succeeds, and I think if this film, the new one, fails in any way, it's that it just doesn't feel natural making that joke, but I think it succeeds in other ways.
Yeah. Well, and I think the sequel problem that doesn't happen with the first one, like you're saying, is like Jordan, and now we know from The Last Dance, is all about basketball.
Oh my God.
Like that's all he is.
The sanctity of the game and the drive to to victory. And please watch The Last Dance. It's incredible.
Yeah. This is being filmed, the first Space Jam, in 95, and so he had just lost, kicked out of the playoffs, and then he's about to make his triple finals win again. So he's saying, I will only do this if it does not interfere at all with me playing basketball.
Right.
So they cram it in, and he's doing 12, 14-hour days.
You
they
get
built
to
him
see
a custom
this.
gym.
Yes, you get to see this in The Last Dance.
Yeah.
It's absolutely immaculate. It's incredible to see some of the footage that they have. It's amazing.
It's basically almost an NBA All-Star game where the set of Space Jam becomes, because he's playing for 3 hours after they're filming, and then he's back again at 6 a.m.
And
on
it's a
set.
revolving
He's
door
relentless.
of the stars, man. People who are in the movie, Dennis Rodman, before he's even part of the Bulls, before he's a teammate of Jordan's, just a couple years after, he's there. That is, it became this kind of like office for Jordan while he was there, and you just bring him. I want to play him. We're gonna, testing out who's the new talent, all that. If you need a meeting with him, well, we're going to Warner Brothers Studios. It's absolutely. It was one of the a highlight of me being somebody who knows nothing about basketball, nothing about Michael Jordan other than Space Jam. I had context for how that fit into the man's life, which I'd never had before. I'm so thankful that I actually went down that road because it connected for me, and I hope that I'm trying to give some of that back here, where it's like what he was, and that's why I watched it. But what he was is hard to describe, and what he meant to that time and place. It was a very special, very, very special thing.
But knowing enough about him, and now he's on the second of 3 final wins when it comes to, we want to make a sequel. He's not interested at all. I mean, my God, he's back in the basketball game.
I'm doing the impossible again.
But yeah. So come 97, he's like, I don't care about this anymore. Get this out of my face. But they're like, we got to have other jams. What are the other jams? So the first thing they come up with is Spy Jam, and it's going to star Jackie Chan.
Yes.
And the Looney Tunes.
And
then
they've done it.
Then they decided, or these were all, I think, in concurrent, development, and then it was whichever
one caught on first. Let's go. I love it. Please.
They had Race Jam with Jeff Gordon.
Yes.
Because he was huge, and then I loved it. I didn't even like racing, and I was like, I love his car. I love DuPont. I love the rainbow car. He's
the only NASCAR driver I knew at the time. Absolutely, I'm right there with you. Exactly.
And then, of course, they had Skate Jam with Tony Hawk because he was ascending, which they still might do. I mean, who knows?
But if they had made these. Even if they weren't full feature films, even if they were like a TV show, if they had done and they did it hard on each one of these, it would have been beautiful. What you're talking about right now is a non-existent series that it exists in some other timeline, and I'm crying that I'm not there.
Yeah. Well, so what did end up happening, this guy, Joe Dante, he's a director. He was pitching and working on a biographical piece on Chuck Jones, who was one of the early creators at Warner Brothers in the 30s. And they said, it's old, it's period, don't care. We want another Space Jam. Yeah. So he agreed. They settled on Looney Tunes Back in Action as their follow-up thing. He wanted it to be more of a tribute to Chuck Jones, wanted kind of the anti-Space Jam, disliked how they represented the brand, similar to Rizzy, where they're like, I don't know why Bugs Bunny would be doing hip-hop. He wanted to bring it back. But he said it was the longest year and a half of his life. It was the worst thing in the world. They hired 25 different writers, then bombed in the box office, and then they held out until this thing in 2021.
Gosh.
With LeBron.
I hate to hear that they had some real ideas there. This entire time I'm like, well, they probably just didn't have anything that sounded that good. It probably just wasn't that great, and that's all probably still true, to be quite fair. But it's like there were at least. I'm delighted to hear that the other ideas that were floating around were at least so colorful. And now looking back, I wish to God they had went forward with at least another one of them, some of them, before the 90s were through. They really needed to capitalize on this name and take it into another realm. If they can't get Jordan back, let's go. Tony Hawk. It's a no-brainer. It's like, let's do it. Jeff Gordon, Race Jam. I am there,
Well, here's the culmination that I found looking into kind of committing to something. What does this represent? And I think it really does boil down to Bugs Bunny as a character who he is. Like, people keep hearkening back to, like, well, we want it like the old Looney Tunes, or like, what was that? What did Chuck Jones and Tex Avery and all those
what you
guys
have
come up
uncovered
with
for me
with
today, and then maybe you're about to say it more eloquently, but what you've said is that the Looney Tunes were always playing second fiddle. They were always there to highlight something else, to prop up something else. That's what their
music,
function.
Michael Jordan.
Yeah, that was what it was. And that's worth something. And that's show business, baby. It really is, down to the heart of it. Is, oh, man, that putting on the show and making your guest or making your host look as good as they could be. That's the job of the cast members on Saturday Night Live, is make that host look incredible. That is what the Looney Tunes are. They are the cast of Saturday Night Live. They are the support group. And ultimately, that's what they come down to serve in both of these films. I wish I had checked out back in action. I saw it back in the theaters back in the day, but I don't remember it whatsoever. But, that is what at the core of these films.
The thing that I saw, and I'm stealing this from a video that I'll post a link to, but this guy was talking about, like, why Bugs Bunny, did he age well? What makes him work as a character? Because he doesn't seem like a character from the 1940s. He's got anarchy. There's gender bending. He wears dresses. He's a wise ass. It doesn't feel like Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie from the same time. Right. And he said the reason he's aged so well is because, talking about, like, the corporate stuff and being a vessel for something else, like, he is technically, leaning up against the Warner Brothers logo in a tuxedo, biting a carrot, but he's not really a corporate mascot like, Mickey is tame, inoffensive, international. He's the logo for Disney, and Bugs is a New Yorker who's brash and defiant, and he makes you laugh. He's not the face of a corporation. Like, thankfully, Warner Brothers has not leaned into that. He's the underdog. He's cool. Yeah. This is the great line. The guy said, "Bugs is who you want to be. Nobody wants to be Mickey Mouse."
Oh my God. That's not put it perfect, more perfect. That is exactly right. Yeah. And you put that person supporting something to saying something else. That's what that character is so good for. You want to be that character. He's cool. He made the antagonist into a fool, and he does it every time.
Well, and I think tying in this new one with the old one and Bugs Bunny and what he's doing and what he's done.
This is where this film wins outright, is where we find Bugs Bunny, literally where we find Bugs Bunny in this film. When LeBron James, and this might be spoilers if you want to go see this, when LeBron James is stranded on the Toon Planet inside the hard drives of the Warnerverse, the Toon Planet has been deserted and there is population 1. And then as LeBron walks into the town, it ticks to 2. Lo and behold, the one left is Bugs Bunny. And we find out that all of the Toons were convinced to leave by the algorithm. And Bugs is the only one that stayed. And he's been living without them for quite some time. And immediately, this is where the film starts to have a heartbeat for me, because we find a Bugs Bunny that is stricken with grief. He's run himself almost near insane. And they really depict this through it. And it's not that they go in any crazy way. I almost forget about it moment to moment because it's so loony. But when you go back, oh my God, they play it as a joke. But it's like, as comedy is good, it's not a joke. Really start to, I think, comment on where the Looney Tunes property finds itself in 2021. When I go into this movie going, why now? And then I'm arriving to this Bugs Bunny character that has lost everyone. And I've never seen this character like this. I've never imagined I would. This is where the movie starts to come online.
Well, that's what's so interesting, is because his character, he's the underdog. He's cool. Like I said, he's not... I don't know if that's changing the character in a way, but it's like you're saying, it's weird.
You got to take him somewhere, or he can't say anything anymore. That's who he is and what he was, and maybe he can be that again. But I think in this country, and I think the world is in a moment of flux and transition and sobering and reflection. And what now functionally in the plot, it serves as Bugs Bunny realizes that he can use LeBron and this opportunity to amass the team. He's selling it to LeBron as the team. And here we go. He is duping LeBron, but it's not. This is subtextual. It's not on the surface of this film, but he is duping LeBron, saying, yeah, we can go amass your perfect team to do this game and get your son back. But what he's really doing is found a way off of the planet to go and find his family. And what you do naturally is why you win. And it's why you've been known since the 1930s.
Yeah.
The movie comes alive with 20 minutes left when these tunes start being toony, and they realize that that's the only way to win. That's the only way to win in life. And the movie, in a nonverbal moment, came alive to me when you see LeBron James cheering on these tunes who have needed the pep talk the whole movie.
Yeah.
Finding a Bugs Bunny that has gone through all of this, that is presenting it on screen and using it narratively, thought that to be really worthwhile by the end. And I can't believe I'm saying this.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me, which the conclusion that I drew from it is, like we're talking about with Bugs Bunny being, he is his own character and he's not some corporate mascot because he has these certain qualities. It's like that was, in a way, synonymous with Michael Jordan as well, and what he needed in that moment. And Michael Jordan is a lot like Bugs in that way. And I feel like LeBron, this is where like the disconnect comes for me with the characters, is more like Disney. Like the story you're telling is not as much. Maybe he would do better with alongside Mickey Mouse, or,
and they conquer it all and they're confident, and that's but it was so interesting then to find myself in the few moments of the film. I've got a Bugs Bunny who's becoming the active ingredient really here in the narrative, as they pull the moment like he's going to fade away, and you really get a Bugs Bunny death moment in every way that you could imagine it. I mean, it really, I'm like, my mouth agaped and I went, they're not doing this. And of course they're not really doing it like they're, they give it all the emotional resonance that they can give it. Lo and behold, he pops out into the real world, and now he's going to be roommates with LeBron. So it's all happy-go-lucky. It's cool, but it almost skates over the point there when the emotional arc that Bugs Bunny has is it's not worth the risk, and I know the risk. I know what it's like to be without my family. My family is together now. I can't allow for this family to be risk split up.
Yeah. Well, just crazy how it's all wrapped up in.
I'm amazed.
Big
I'm
flabbergasted. Commercialism.
I'm sweating because I've been avoiding this movie. I've not had that response with many things. I'm kind of into, filmmakers taking a new take on things and seeing properties go in new directions. That's why I've responded so well to what they've done, really just with the Bugs Bunny character and what it has to do with loss. And then, if you're going to make a movie about something, it's like, that's something to make it about. And I didn't expect to find it at the heart of Bugs Bunny.
Amazing.
And granted, I've been saying most of this episode that the first hour and a half is it's a movie searching for meaning. And I think that it really is. But then I think that plays all the while back into everything it's really trying to say. Well, how do you find your identity in this, in where we find ourselves now?
And what is, like we said up at the top, what is original, what is authentic? It never started out being that way.
Right.
And then so you
right.
have
Their
to
second fiddle.
grab
it's
on
meant
what you
to
can.
Sell something. So, then maybe that is leaning into the thoughts of it. It's, I found this to be so rich and it was so unexpected. I've had a fantastic time. So thank you guys for following along. Thank you, Taylor, so much. Yeah. This has been an absolute blast.
Reach out to us at ILLITERATEPod on Instagram.
What should they have done? What one of the Space Jams would you like to have seen? Is this the way to go? I don't know, but it's certainly interesting. Man, I'm so glad to have had this conversation about this because again, I said at the top of the show, we don't trash things here. And so if we're going to do an episode about this, and obviously the reviews are bad, but this isn't about why it being bad, but it's about why does this exist?
What's the kernel of truth?
Yes. Where did it come out of nowhere right now? Why? What is this horse of another color? And what about it ended up in this form? And there's so much more here between these characters and the longevity between just multimedia and sports in the last 30 years. This was awesome. So thank you guys. Thank you, Taylor, again. And we will catch you next week.